Rob Reiner's son just admitted a truth that shocked everyone. Behind the laughter and fame, a family's life hid deep pain and secrets. The confession raises questions no one saw coming. What really happened that night? Could anyone have predicted this tragedy? Stay tuned as we reveal the story behind the awful truth. A celebrated life and a hidden strain. Rob Reiner was known to the world as a steady presence in film. He was an actor, a director, and a storyteller who believed in people, friendship, and emotional honesty. His work focused on connection. He made films that felt warm, thoughtful, and human. Over many decades, he built a reputation for being calm, prepared, and respectful. In public, his life looked balanced and successful. At home, Rob was married to Michelle Singer Reiner. Together, they were seen as a strong and supportive couple. They raised children, built routines, and stayed close to family values. From the outside, it looked like a stable household shaped by care, resources, and intention. There was no image of chaos or neglect. Friends and colleagues often described their home as loving and grounded. But stability on the surface does not always mean peace underneath. Over time, strain quietly grew inside the family. One of Rob and Michelle's children, their son Nick, struggled in ways that didn't easily show in public. His problems were not sudden. They stretched back years and slowly shaped the family dynamic. Love was present, but tension was too. Rob continued working, creating films and planning future projects. Michelle stayed deeply involved in family life and support. They did not turn away from their responsibilities. Still, worry became part of daily life. Concern replaced ease, fear replaced certainty. What once felt manageable began to feel fragile. By the final months of their lives, the family was holding together, but under pressure. The calm image the public saw did not reflect the full reality. Behind closed doors, something important was slipping out of balance, and no one fully knew how close they were to the breaking point. The Christmas party confrontation. On the night of December 13, 2025, Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle attended a Christmas party hosted by Conan O'Brien. It was meant to be an easy night. The room was filled with familiar faces, longtime friends, and people who had known each other for years. Nothing about the setting suggested danger. It was supposed to be relaxed, social, and warm. Nick Reiner was also there. From early in the evening, something felt off. People nearby noticed tension building around him. His behavior stood out in a way that made others uncomfortable. As the night went on, that tension turned into a loud argument between Nick and his father. It was not subtle. Voices were raised, and the energy in the room changed. Guests nearby could not ignore it. Several people later described Nick's behavior as unsettling. He did not seem calm or in control. His actions were strong enough that people remembered them clearly the next day. Rob did not walk away from the situation. He stayed engaged and tried to manage it instead of avoiding it. Michelle stayed close to him the entire time. They moved together and did not separate. Not long after the argument, Rob and Michelle left the party with Nick. To others, it looked like parents stepping in to handle a private family problem. Their exit seemed intentional, as if they wanted to remove the situation from public view and bring it back home. Once they were gone, the party continued, but the moment lingered. What many guests did not know was that this confrontation was not an isolated moment. It was the surface of something much deeper that had been building for years. And while the party ended, the night was far from over. Behind the scenes, fear had already entered the picture, and what Rob shared later would give this moment a much darker meaning. Fear before dawn. After leaving the party, the night appeared to slow down. From the outside, it looked like things had settled. Rob Reiner went on with part of his normal routine. Later that evening, he spoke on the phone with a close friend and longtime creative partner. The conversation focused on work, future plans, and projects still ahead. There was no panic in his tone. He sounded focused and calm, like someone still thinking about tomorrow. But beneath that calm surface, something had already changed. Earlier, Rob had shared something deeply concerning with people close to him. He admitted that he was afraid of his son. This was not said lightly or out of frustration. It came from a place of real worry. It reflected a parent who felt he was losing control of a situation he had tried to manage for years. That fear did not appear suddenly. It had grown slowly over time. Nick's behavior had become more unpredictable. Past struggles had started to feel heavier. What once felt like a problem that could be guided or treated now felt unstable. Rob and Michelle were still supportive, still involved, but concern had turned into alertness. Love had begun to mix with fear. The house they returned to that night was quiet. No neighbors noticed anything unusual. No alarms were triggered. Everything appeared normal from the outside, but inside, the emotional weight of the evening followed them home. The argument from the party did not disappear just because the doors closed. This was the final stretch of the night. There were no public moments left, no witnesses, no distractions. Only a family alone with years of unresolved tension pressing down at once. What happened next would not be discovered until hours later. And when the silence of the early morning was finally broken, it would reveal that fear had been closer to the truth than anyone wanted to believe. The murders in Brentwood. Sometime in the early morning hours, while the neighborhood was still asleep, everything changed. Inside the Brentwood home, Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle were attacked and killed. There were no warning signs outside the house, no broken doors, no shattered windows, no sounds that pulled attention from nearby homes. The street remained quiet, unaware of what had just happened behind closed walls. Hours later, the silence ended. That afternoon, their daughter Romy went to check on them. She lived close by and expected a normal visit. Instead, she found both of her parents unresponsive inside the house. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics and police arrived within minutes, but there was nothing they could do. Rob and Michelle were pronounced dead at the scene. The home was secured, and investigators quickly determined that this was not a natural death. It was classified as a homicide investigation. From the beginning, certain details stood out. There were no signs of forced entry. Everything in the house appeared intact. This told investigators that whoever committed the attack was not a stranger breaking in. The person either had access to the home or was already inside. Neighbors were questioned right away. Several said they heard nothing during the night. No shouting, no alarms, no disturbance of any kind. In a quiet residential area, that absence of noise mattered. It suggested the attacker moved through the house carefully and with purpose. As detectives began rebuilding the timeline, attention shifted toward the final hours of the night. The argument at the party, the quiet return home, and the stillness that followed now carried new weight. What had seemed like private family tension was suddenly part of a much darker picture. And as investigators looked closer at who was inside the house that night, one name began to rise above all others, setting the stage for what came next. A silent house and a narrowed focus. As the investigation moved forward, detectives focused on what the house did not show. There were no broken locks, no damaged doors, and no signs of a forced entry. Windows were closed and intact. Nothing suggested that someone had broken in from the outside. This detail immediately changed the direction of the case. In a neighborhood like Brentwood, security systems are common and sounds usually travel. Yet neighbors reported hearing nothing during the night. No alarms went off. No raised voices carried through the street. No signs of panic or struggle reached outside the home. That silence was important. It suggested that whatever happened inside the house unfolded quietly. Investigators also looked at how the home was laid out. Moving through it without making noise would require familiarity. Someone unfamiliar would likely hesitate, turn on lights, or bump into objects. But the scene suggested controlled movement. The attacker seemed to know where to go and how to move without drawing attention. This pointed towards someone who had been inside the home many times before. Because of these details, the list of possible suspects narrowed quickly. This was not random violence. It was not a break-in gone wrong. The evidence suggested access, trust, and proximity. The focus shifted away from strangers and toward people already connected to the family. At the same time, investigators began reconstructing the timeline after the deaths. They looked closely at who left the house and when. Phone records, camera footage, and witness accounts were reviewed piece by piece. Each movement mattered now. One name kept appearing as the timeline came together. The same person involved in the public argument hours earlier was also unaccounted for in the early morning. As attention sharpened and the silence of the house grew louder, investigators began following a trail that stretched beyond Brentwood and into the city, leading directly toward the next critical turn in the case. Nick's movements and arrest. After the tragedy at home, Nick left the house very calmly, as if nothing had happened. He did not rush or panic. Later, he checked into a nearby hotel. Staff noticed blood on some of his clothes and belongings. Investigators quickly connected the blood to the crime scene. Every movement Nick made from that point became important to the police. Security cameras at a gas station showed Nick filling up his car. He looked quiet and collected, not nervous at all. Police used the footage to track his route. It was clear he had been on the move for hours. Investigators pieced together his steps carefully, following the trail from the house to the hotel and then to public places he visited. Authorities finally found Nick near Exposition Park. He did not try to run or fight. Police arrested him without any struggle. Officers noted that despite the seriousness of the crime, Nick seemed detached and calm. Every piece of evidence from the hotel room, the gas station, and his movements supported the growing case against him. This series of actions painted a picture of someone who was aware of what had happened and knew exactly where he was going. Investigators began to build a timeline of his movements and thoughts during those hours, trying to understand his state of mind. The evidence would soon play a big role in the courtroom. Even as law enforcement prepared their next steps, questions remained. How could someone move so calmly after such a violent act? What would the forensics reveal about the crime itself? These questions would lead straight into the details of the violence and intent behind the tragedy. Forensics, violence, and intent. Once investigators had Nick in custody, the focus turned to the home and the crime scene. Forensic teams carefully examined every room, every object. They looked for fingerprints, DNA, and anything that could show exactly what happened. The evidence confirmed the worst fears. Rob and Michelle had been killed in a brutal, violent way. Medical examiners determined the time of death in the early hours of December 14th. The injuries were severe and close range. Sharp force wounds covered the bodies, showing repeated intentional strikes. It was clear this was not a sudden accident or a random act. The level of violence suggested deep anger or planning. Forensic reports also showed the attacker had control of the situation, moving deliberately, which supported the idea of intent. Nothing about the scene suggested a struggle with an unknown intruder. The attacker had known the house and the victims well. Investigators used the blood patterns, positions of the bodies, and other details to piece together what likely happened. Every mark and wound told part of the story. These findings allowed law enforcement to move forward with charges. On that basis, Nick was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The authorities also added special circumstances, highlighting the severity and planning involved. The forensics painted a clear but horrifying picture. This was a deliberate act with tragic consequences. It was a turning point in the case, moving it from investigation into prosecution. The details of the violence and the clear signs of intent shocked the public and set the stage for the next part of the story. The courtroom would soon become the place where these facts were laid bare. How would Nick respond to the charges? what defense would his team present against the overwhelming evidence? The answers would come fast as the legal process began. The courtroom shock. Nick appeared in court for the first time on December 17th. Cameras and reporters were outside, but inside the courtroom, the focus was on the charges and the evidence. He faced 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of his parents. The charges included special circumstances which made the case more serious and meant that if convicted, the consequences could be very severe. The courtroom was tense as everyone realized the gravity of the situation. The judge read the charges and Nick quietly listened. There was no outburst, no reaction that showed surprise or fear. The public and media followed every moment closely, knowing this was a high-profile case involving a famous family. News quickly spread that Nick had hired a high-profile defense attorney. The attorney was known for handling difficult cases, and the announcement added another layer of attention. People wondered how the defense might respond to the evidence, which already seemed overwhelming. From the forensic reports to the surveillance footage, the case against Nick looked strong. The courtroom also revealed the beginning of the legal strategy. Prosecutors emphasized the deliberate nature of the act, showing the repeated violence and careful movements captured by investigators. The defense would later be expected to challenge the interpretation of evidence and the question of intent. For everyone following the story, it was a shock to see a son accused of killing both his parents. The tragedy and the details of the investigation were now fully public, leaving the family, friends, and fans to grapple with disbelief and sorrow. As the courtroom drama began, the public started looking into Nick's past. His struggles, family relationships, and history with substance abuse were now part of the story. Understanding his past would soon be key to understanding the tragedy and what may have led to this unthinkable moment. A troubled past comes into focus. As the case moved forward, Nick's past began to attract attention. He openly admitted that he had never really bonded with his father, Rob. Their relationship had always been distant, and this lack of connection weighed heavily on both of them. Friends and family said that Nick had struggled emotionally for many years, and these struggles often affected his behavior and choices. From a young age, Nick experimented with substances. Alcohol, drugs, and other substances became a way for him to cope with stress and feelings of isolation. He went through several rehab programs over the years, but relapses were common. These cycles of recovery and relapse made it difficult for Nick to find stability. At times, he experienced periods of homelessness and lived in unstable situations. Even so, his family continued to support him, hoping he could turn his life around. Nick's past struggles did not excuse what happened, but they helped explain some of the pressures and challenges he faced. Investigators and the public began to see a picture of a young man who had long been wrestling with inner turmoil. Friends described him as talented and intelligent, but also fragile and sometimes unpredictable. His family's fear, combined with their hope for his recovery, created a complicated and tense environment. As more details emerged, it became clear that Nick's history of substance abuse, failed attempts at rehabilitation, and emotional distance from his father were part of a larger story. These elements painted a fuller picture of the environment and tensions that might have contributed to the tragedy. Understanding Nick's past was critical as the case moved toward trial. How much of his history would play a role in the courtroom? Would it explain his actions, or would the focus remain solely on the evidence from the crime itself? The answers would soon begin to unfold in the courtroom and in public perception. Grief, legacy, and unanswered questions. After the tragedy, the Reiner family faced both private grief and public attention. Friends, colleagues, and fans mourned the loss of Rob and Michelle, remembering them for their kindness, creativity, and contributions to film and storytelling. The family released a public statement expressing heartbreak and asking for privacy, while privately coping with a loss that was sudden and devastating. Hollywood paid tribute to Rob, celebrating his decades-long career and the influence he had on movies, television, and generations of fans. Many shared personal memories, highlighting his humor, talent, and generosity. Yet, even in these tributes, the shadow of the tragedy remained. The loss was felt not only by the family, but also by the creative community and the public who admired him. Meanwhile, the legal process continued. Nick's case remained in the spotlight, with court dates, evidence reviews, and media coverage keeping the story in public view. Questions about what led to the events of that December morning were still unanswered. How could a son turn against his parents in such a violent way? What role did his past struggles play? Would the courtroom provide clarity, or would some answers remain unknown? The family, friends, and fans were left to wrestle with the reality of the tragedy while remembering the lives that had been lost. Private mourning continued alongside public remembrance, showing the complex mix of grief, memory, and the search for understanding. Even as the investigation and legal proceedings moved forward, one question lingered above all. What truly happened behind the closed doors of that home? The answers might eventually come through the courtroom and the justice system, but the emotional impact and the mystery of the events left a lasting mark on everyone connected to the family. The confession from Rob Reiner's son leaves a deep ache and many questions unanswered. Behind the laughter, fame, and bright lights, a family carried hidden pain that ended in tragedy. No success or love could protect them from the heartbreak that unfolded behind closed doors. As the legal process moves forward, the world watches in shock and sorrow.